Party. We are here. We're live, ready to go, ready to get started. Let me do this.
All right.
Record. Okay. How are you? How's everyone doing? Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Ready? Yeah.
All right. Let me. Okay. Yeah, I'm multitasking today. A lot is going on with me today. Okay, so yeah, okay, here we are. We are good here. We're good. Okay, cool. All right, we're gonna get started. All right. Good afternoon. How is everyone doing? How you guys doing today?
I'm good. Just busy and productive.
Doing good. Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you, Kiana, right? I got that right? Kiana? Yes, I got that right. And Edidiong for coming on the FiredUP KC show. This is gonna be a great conversation, man. You guys are awesome, and I'm honored to have you guys here today. But for those of you who do not know, for people online, people on Facebook who are watching this who do not know who both of you are, Kiana, can you just introduce yourself? Give a brief bio about yourself, about what you've been doing lately, and letting people know where you're at.
Yeah, my name is Kiana Sinks, and Zeke, thank you for having me on your show. I am here in Kansas City, Missouri, and I too go to UMKC getting that master's, and so I'll be back this fall. But all things considered, people know me as a community advocate here in our city, and my start started, unfortunately, when Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, in the similar aspect of our country, when that happened. And so I was at college, founded my school's African American Union, and that really changed and shifted my perspective as advocacy is concerned. And when I came to Kansas City, it was just, man, like, if you're really serious about doing this work and, wanting to make a change, sometimes the blueprint and what that looks like isn't laid for you. But I've just been very fortunate to meet amazing leaders across our city, different age, different backgrounds. And it's paved a path for me that I'm really excited about, and giving me opportunities that a lot of people, I guess, would say is pretty cool. So I'm excited about the conversation today, and being here with you as well, Edon, and just looking forward to seeing this next wave and this new normal of change and what we can do.
Yes. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you being here today, because you've been doing great work with your platform, Black Excellence Kansas City. That's awesome. Your shows are really insightful. So I love what you're doing, and I'm proud. I said I'm gonna be like you one day when I grow up. So I'm looking up to you. So Edidiong, can you let people know who you are? Because I know you're doing massive work as well. Let people know who you are, people who are watching today.
Yeah, so my name is Edidiong, aka E.CHRYS Obot, and I call myself as the connector, a culture influencer. And so my main objective as a culture influencer is to pretty much educate and create awareness, especially in our society, our community. So background about me, I'm a first generation born Nigerian American. So American born, but Nigerian raised. So all my people out there, how you did? But essentially what I try to do is to create conversation, discussions, panels, even events, and outreach centered around how we as Africans in the diaspora, whether you're African American, whether you identify as African, how we can all learn from each other and support each other in such a way where there is unity. There's always been this conversation about Africans versus African Americans. And so for me, it's more of a conversation of, instead of a versus, it's more of like, how do we learn from each other? Especially for people like myself, where I tell people that the first generation born immigrants, born to immigrants who came here, we are literally writing what our history looks like. We are literally writing our story and shaping it. And so we have the opportunity to change the narrative of that African versus African American, or immigrants versus those who were born here, whatever the case may be in your respective culture. And so that is what my my initiative really is to educate as well as create awareness. And also to promote each other. I mean, obviously I'm Black and I got on my African shirt, so you already know what's up. But
Hey.
but that does not mean that I'm not inclusive of other cultures as well, because believe it or not, we all have some form of similarities in different cultures. And so that is my key role, just to make sure that I create that form of dialogue that has opportunity to educate and create awareness.
Awesome. Well, that's why I have you both here today, because you both know more than I do. So that's why I brought you guys here today, because I don't know a lot. I'm just asking questions, and you both of your bios are just insightful. So here today, I'm just going to ask questions and let the conversation flow. And so we all have seen everything happen in the news. We've seen what happened with George Floyd, and it's something that is so painful and something that should never happen to any human being. Now, my challenge of things I've been seeing in the media lately has it's become something of a division where Black Lives Matter has become more of a political statement. And I'm just asking, why is it a political statement where it should be a matter of common sense? What do you guys have to say about the whole situation and Black Lives Matter becoming a political statement instead of just being a fact that should happen? Whoever wants to go can take.
I can go. I think that for me, with this season that we're in right now, and especially with the pandemic, and I think a lot of people have already alluded to this, that obviously everybody for the most part has been at home. And so, we're not used to sitting in one place or having to work from home from those who can still work. But we do know that everything is in the news. And so there's a tendency for everybody at any point to catch what's going on in the news or hear about it on social media. It's very much, on a big awareness. So oftentimes when we are usually at work, usually we're in an office 9 to 5 for those who have it, or 5 to 11, or whatever shift that you work. You're not necessarily engaged in the news. You may scroll through your Facebook or IG and see a couple of things like here, share. But now that we're in such a state where everything is, what would I say? Everybody's more aware and more in tune with what's going on. This hashtag Black Lives Matter, which started back 2016, 2015, 2016 with the death of Trayvon Martin. A lot of people kind of just like, it really isn't that big of a deal for some people. Some people were like, with this been going on and we need to put a stop to it. I think now we're in a state and in a season where a lot of people are more aware. People who kind of shrugged it off are seeing how consistent these things are happening. These shootings are happening to our Black brothers and our sisters, and even to people outside of our color, because at the end of the day, it's about injustice, right? And so, yes, we definitely identify that there's more injustices happening in our Black community. But overall, like, people are getting a chance to see, the injustices happening to our communities from the people who are supposed to protect us. And so I think now people are moving towards the movement in some form or in some way. Either they are trying to find out more about it, or maybe they know a little bit, but now they've been more educated because now they're tuned in, whether it's through the protests, whether it's through their friends sharing different things. There may be personal stories that they have had to endure and hold on to, and now they're finally coming out and saying them on social media. Maybe they're even signing the petitions. Whatever way that they're getting engaged at that level, that's where they are, compared to a few years ago where it was more of like an option. Now it's like, it's not an option.
Yes.
This is very real. This isn't, and it's sad that we have to say that Black Lives Matter, but we have to, because people just, you can tell people were just not really aware of it. They kind of try to generalize it or downplay it. But when you consistently see deaths of Black people, I mean, when you look at it, before George Floyd, we were talking about, Mr. Aubrey and Breonna Taylor, and there were other people who died right before him. You understand? That people were talking about, and to them it was just kind of like another, Black Lives Matter. When George Floyd died and in the manner that he died, I tell people like that was like the icing on the cake. Like Black people was like, enough is enough. Like we have video, he's not resisting, and you can still die. And so a lot of people who saw the horrific video, I think now, whether you're Black, whether you're white, Hispanic, whatever, you know, Asian, Indian, whatever you are, you identify at least with the struggle that this man had, you know, on the floor, detained, handcuffed, feet, you know, are held together as well. It's not like he's trying to run from you. You understand that you have citizens who are pleading for his life. So that just tells you that, you know, to those police officers, they may have felt like they just doing their job. But to us, it's kind of like this is a reoccurring thing. I actually just posted something on my Instagram today. It was a little excerpt from the Twilight Zone called Replay on episode 3. You can go and check it out. My IG is at E_CHRYS. But it talks about this. It talks about how, you know, Black parents in general kind of have that fear at sometimes when their child goes out, just to make sure, like, hey, you know, do what you got to do. Don't say nothing. And you can do all those great things and still not make it back home. And so you see that in this video clip that this mother, she is just kind of like very worried, very protective of what's going on. And towards the end, you kind of see the confrontation between her and this officer and the entire community. So, you know, I think that for now, it's kind of moving from just a political statement to, you know, a full-on movement, and everybody is more aware and they're more tuned in and engaged about how this is going to affect police reform, how this is going to affect policy changes. And I think the first step is just like what our leaders showed us is the protesting. And so now we have to move from protesting to also policy changes and making and getting involved. So I'll give it over to you, Kiana. You can add your 2 cents to it.
Yes.
No, it's I echo everything you said. And it's today I was having a conversation earlier in a meeting, and it was using your struggles, as they would say, to advance policy. And I think that it's 2 sides right now, as it relates to protesting, and a lot of people are speaking out, and you're seeing what's happening around our country in different perspectives, and a lot more people are engaging in a lot of areas that they typically wouldn't do. But also we have a generation that was not here for the civil rights movement, that did not witness Rodney King, that really don't remember Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown and Ferguson and things of that nature. And the list goes on and on and on, sadly. And so I think at this point, as you mentioned, it's so easy to get caught up in what we see from a social media standpoint. You know, our grandmothers didn't have that back then. John Lewis, when he marched on the bridge of Selma, he didn't know he was going to end up on the front page of New York Times. It was really him sacrificing his life to advance civil rights for America, and not only for America, but for Black America. And so today, when we see a lot of the media, which is great, right? But also the sincerity that I've had to have conversations this week to my white counterparts, and being careful how you portray your protests, be careful how you use your words. You know, now's the time to start evaluating relationships. You know, the job force is not going to be the same from a COVID-19 standpoint, and from a cultural dynamic standpoint as well. And so there's so many things that were already being exposed as it relates to preconditions, right? We heard that a lot in the healthcare sector, as COVID-19 made all of us go home and like work our day to day. And now when you add racism on top of it, it's been this systemic issue for quite some time. And so, yes, it is certainly, the time is here to start cultivating and educating and learning about different things that people in our community need to take aware of. And at the end of the day, if we're not voting, if we're not, you know, holding city council members accountable for what they say they're going to do, then we don't advance policy change, and we don't implement some of the things in our government when it comes to police reform and a lot of things that we're seeing change. And so I think right now is a great time to address things that need to be addressed, to have the conversations that need to be had, but also walking and chewing gum too. And quite frankly, not a lot of people know how to do that. But I think at this point, it is our responsibility to hold white people accountable for what they say that they want to do and what they want to learn. It's a national issue. You know, we witnessed a video that was horrible. And so when you can be a Black man in 2020 and, you know, be complying with the police and still lose your life, that is a problem that we all need to jump on board and be aware of that. You know, I have 2 brothers and we have those conversations. You know, when you're driving, make sure you have your license out. Just that's the first thing you do, just like when you put your seatbelt on. But when I talk to some of my friends, they're not having those conversations with their brothers, with their mothers and their fathers. And so just how many different nuances there is in between of the consciousness and the unconsciousness of being Black in America has brought to the forefront for a lot of people, and including ourselves. Like we've heard it, hashtag we tired. We are tired.
We are tired.
We can be in a fire. We can get 911 called on us. So it's like all of these different things that are being exposed. And I think at this point, the great thing is no one is willing to accept misbehavior and white supremacy in the little things as it relates to me walking down the street or if I'm talking to Congress. I mean, I think it just, at this point, it's like, what are we going to do to advance America at its fullest extent? And until we vote and until we hold people accountable, yes, I put you in office. I live here in this community. You're responsible. If I call you, you need to return my phone call. This is what they're getting paid to do. And so I think for me, I've even found hope and just some accountability in my own self-reflection over the past 2 weeks of wanting to read more, wanting to understand, and what am I doing to make sure that here in my community that I'm being honest and upfront, and if I have some things that I feel people need to know, that they know that in my concern. So hopefully, you know, people are starting to not turning the blind eye to what is going on in America, but the true change starts with us as the next generation holding the arch to really make a voice for change and put some action to that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you guys said it all. I really want to say this is I think, you know, this time, you know, the racial tension has opened a lot of conversations, especially with a couple of my friends. You know, people have been calling me up, texting me, asking me about certain things that usually would be a conversation that we would not have. But this time is more important. And I think something you said, Kiana, is you said that it's time to know who is actually your friend, who is on your side of things. Because before now, a lot of things have been swept under the rug because, you know, we're not talking about it. But now it's either you are for Black Lives Matter or you're not for it. You know, there's no, I'm on the sideline and watching things happen, because really it's not a political statement. I've been saying that. It's literally right against wrong. You know, like how long can this go? Because we are the next generation, and if we do not make the positive change, it will continue. Now, I want to ask this because you mentioned about, you know, reading and being able to educate ourselves. I think that is the most important thing, the key thing right now for elderly people, young people, kids, to start learning the history, to start learning the things that are affecting us or affecting everyone. Because I think when I came to the United States, I've heard about, you know, the racial injustice, I've heard about racism, but I didn't understand what it really was until I took an architecture class that talked about redlining. And that really opened my eye. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it's like there's a redlining in Kansas City that separates two classes of people, right? And when I learned about it, I'm like, whoa, like I have been walking the streets not knowing why it's the way it is. Because you see how the streets are, you're like, why is it so, you know, not funded? And you're like, okay, this is what happened. There are histories behind this. Now, I want to ask you guys this. What are some ways you would tell people out there to educate themselves on things that will start making people, maybe for schools to start implementing things that will help people to educate themselves on the issue of race and injustice? Whoever wants to take a bite at it can take a bite at it. But what are some things that we should start reading or for schools to start implementing that would help students learn more about this? I think it's something that everyone should know, not just a vague statement. We are about diversity, but we don't do anything about it, you know?
Yeah, I think right now, you know, I've had quite a couple of weeks just being fortunate like you, Zeke, to talk to a lot of leaders who are already working day to day and about these policies and making sure that these things are at the forefront now as we kind of go back into our new normal. And a lot of conversations are, you know, we need to revisit a lot of the foundational aspects of education because they're not portraying racism to our kids. And so just having that conversation, because kids go through that, you know, on the playground, for example, you know, hey, like, can I touch your hair? You know, just little things that they might think that's subtle and it's innocent, but it ends up being down the line a bigger picture. So there's like so many things, redlining, you know, why are certain neighborhoods, you know, I can go on Troost or Beacon Hill and then I can go down to 18th and Vine and it's a complete different, you know, it's just night and day. And so I just think for us, it's just so important in any sector right now to just really like read and lean on the people in our communities who say, hey, like, you know, you've been here for 10 years. Can we have this conversation? Like, what was it like when you were living here? Like, what was like when you were working here, or when, how did the Truth Divide come about? You know, what was the story behind the J.C. Nichols found on the plaza? Like, who was he to Kansas City then? And just spilling all of those things out and understanding, like, why are people petitioning for that to be taken down? So until we visit some of those conversations and be transparent with ourselves, because we can't say in Kansas City that we're for all people if we continue to have racism displayed in the day-to-day lives of every Kansas Citian. So at some point, we have to make some changes. And yes, are we perfect? Do we know everything? No, we don't know everything. We all have things that we need to, you know, work for, and it's a journey. It took 400 years of this to happen. So it's going to take another for every person in America to understand just the white fragility. Read that book for starters, you know, just all of these documentaries that are out here. So, you know, we had to learn our own history. So I think that, yes, as much as we want to say, I'll help you, yes, I'll help you, but I need you to help yourself too at the end of the day. And so it goes above just self-education. I think it's now time to start really having the conversation. We'll have coffee about the sky is blue. You know, now it's time to be more intentional about having coffee with people.
Yes.
Some different conversations. We can talk about the fluff stuff later. Right now, we're talking about this. Like, what book are you reading, or what conversation are you having with someone that's holding you accountable, and y'all are talking about that. So that's what I would say about, you know, as it relates to the next generation, teachers, superintendents, you know, people that are doing that work, like, having the conversation. And if they don't have the resources, that's when we should be like, what as a community we can do to provide outlets so we can teach our kids instead of going on the same narrative that portrays an image that is not true about racism in America.
Edidiong, do you want to take a bite at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think she pretty much summed it up. I think it starts at the foundational level, right? And so oftentimes, but by the time you hear about, you know, racism or inequality or any of that, you know, at the very base, you know, K through 12 is usually during Black History Month. And so, you know, there's always been this notion of, you know, for us, you know, Black history is every day. You know, we are Black history, right? However, in our schools, you know, Black History Month is where you get a chance to talk about the successes of the civil rights movement. You talk about our heroes, our leaders back then. However, you do not talk about like the current Black history, right? The current changes and the current shifts. Like, this should actually be a part of our current Black history, the Black Lives Matter movement, who started it, those founders, you know, what have they done? What are we pushing? You know, what are some of the amendments that have come out of this movement? What are some of the policies and things like that? Like, I think that, you know, obviously that starts with updating our curriculum, and that's at a very foundational level. But guess what? All of this starts with the vote, right? Because we vote these people in. At the end of the day, when it comes down to talking about who's over our educational system, it comes with the power of your vote. And I can easily say, oh, you know, make sure you go out and you vote, register to vote. However, I'm a firm believer, like, you have to be an informed voter. And oftentimes, us in the Black community, we push this rhetoric to go out and vote. And yet there is no form of guidance that will kind of say, who are we putting our votes towards? Because we come back and we say, oh, I'm a nonpartisan organization. I'm a nonpartisan. And we're not talking about partisan here. We're talking about those individuals who support the platform that we need to make sure that we as a people are progressive. regardless of whatever that political, partisan is for that candidate. I think also making sure that we push the agenda that we need to be more intentional about our vote, right? And I think that we have to move, like I said before, we have to move past the rhetoric of go out and vote. Now we need to say, who are we voting for, right? We can't just show up to the polls and then just say, oh, we're going to select all Republican or all Democrat and we voted. And then you got your little sticker and you feel like you did something. However, you may have people who have different mind frames and different mindsets that go against the agenda of the progression of Black people who are a part of the party that you associate with, right? And so I think that obviously for me, it's more about promoting the education behind the vote, not just who you're going to vote for, but also what are those positions that you're voting for? Do you know how those positions serve you and your community? Because it's more than just the sexy positions of the, local races, your mayors, your council people, and all those, maybe the federal, that's your, president and all that. Obviously, we're in a presidential election year now. However, you have other things that are on your ballot you have no idea about. You don't know how this money or this budget is going to affect your school district that your kids go to. You have no idea who's on your water board, who's on the water commission, Texas commissions, any of those railroad commissions. We have no idea what they do and who is sitting there. But all we think about is the sexy positions. And that's why I say we have to have a more informed vote. And I think that we have to do more than just say, get out and vote. We need to be able to say, what are we voting for, right? Who are we voting for? And why are we voting for them? And I think now we're in a position where people are becoming more informed. They're becoming, as we say, woke, right? Like for those who've been woke, we know what's up, right? We know like, hey, I'm gonna hold my city council to, what they said that they ran on when they wanted my vote, right? Same with my mayor, same with everybody else that I have, voted to put in an elective office. However, for those who were just kind of saying, I don't really know, I think I recently saw a interview with Snoop Dogg and Amanda Seales, and he pretty much said like he didn't really know where to start from, in terms of just kind of like change. And this is a man who has such influence. So I think we're now in the age where people are they don't want to just go out and just vote. They need guidance. And that's where Black leaders, Black influencers, myself, you guys, and other people are really needed to show people like, hey, this is the kind of person we think may be able to push the agenda that we are looking for, and not just go out there and vote. I'm gonna get you to the polls, because you can get into the polls all day long, but if they don't know what's on their ballot, they don't know who we trying to support, then it becomes an issue. And I think it has to move past just a partisan level, because people get stuck with, oh, I'm Democrat, or I'm Republican, or I'm an independent. And now we're talking about pushing the Black agenda, right? So we need those people obviously in, those seats. And I get it, as you continue to move up in politics, you understand the importance of rallying behind a party. But obviously some of these initiatives can cross party lines, right? And so I think that that's the most important part. Like if you're a Democrat and you hey, vote for your Democratic people. If you are Republican, vote for them. But however, the conversation has to extend beyond just your vote, right? It has to extend to holding them accountable. And to go back to what we were talking about, education, when you vote these people in, it's important. Your school board, when you vote them in, you need to go and attend their meetings. You can't attend their meetings, tell them that these meeting times are not conducive for our community to put in input. And we demand a new date and time for all of us to be there so that we can see what you are teaching our children. We want some things changed. If you need to go to the Capitol, I live in Texas. So, the Capitol is in Austin. Be willing to go to the Capitol to advocate for your kids, advocate for your children. Be willing to do that, because it takes that. A lot of times we drop the ball on the follow-up. And so a lot of things that we're trying to push from the teachers, that you have to understand, like some of these teachers, they can only do so much. But when it is, from the top down, it's kind of like you don't have no choice. Like this is what the curriculum is. We're going to put that in there. Now, as a teacher, as a staff, as whatever principal, you can see foot on how your school or your district is going to implement that. But you have to be able to start from somewhere. And I say it starts with your vote, but being an informed voter. Don't just be a voter, be an informed voter.
Yes. Wow. That's why I brought you guys on here. So you guys are educating me today. I'm learning, we're all learning together. Now, I want to ask this. This is probably going to be maybe the second to last question. I want to ask this. I see there's a kind of a divide between, when it comes to Africans and African Americans. Now, my question is this: how do we learn about each other and be able to support each other, especially during what's going on? How can we come together and learn about each other and be able to, progress, basically? And I know, Edidiong, you are like a master in this subject. So if you want to go first, go for it. If Kiana wants to go first, you can go for it. But that's the question I want to ask.
I mean, I guess I can go first. So you guys don't be fooled just because I got on this African shirt. Doesn't mean that I'm not American. I was born here. Shout out to Southwest Ailey, Texas. Got to throw it up. But I will say this, and this is why I preface what I said before when we started the conversation, is that as a cultural influencer, my main objective is to create that awareness and to also educate. And so oftentimes there is, this sense of Africans don't want to be involved, or African Americans don't include Africans, or whatever. At the end of the day, if you're in America, you're Black. It's not about, you African American. When you get pulled over, they don't see you have an accent. Before you can even talk, like the largest organ on your body is your skin, right? They see that color. And so when we start talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, that's inclusive of every Black immigrant, every Black person who lives in this country. And so now is the time for all of our Black immigrants, I'll say that, those who are in the African diaspora, which is here, to find ways to educate yourself on what is going on and the changes that directly affect you as an African American, right? Because at the end of the day, even though you may not feel like you're a part of this movement or that's what they're doing, whatever is being passed is going to directly affect you. And it will directly affect your kids and your kids' kids. I had this conversation with a family member of mine. And I said, as much as, nothing against the issues going on back home, because there are plenty of issues going on back home in our respective countries, right? However, I have to kind of reel her back in, like, you have kids here. You have grandkids here too. Mm-hmm. And so it's not to say that one issue is greater than the other issue, right? Because oftentimes that's what is on the minds of some people, is that, back home, I have to deal with, what's going on, because people don't understand, especially when it comes to Black immigrants. Either they are the only ones of their family members here in America. Majority of their family is back home, their siblings, their parents. They may be the person who is really kind of financially supporting them. And so you have a different mindset about what those things look like and those issues and those causes back home. And I had to kind of reel that person in and say, hey, you have to also be engaged here. Because as much as, you support home, there's something happening at your front door. And you don't want to walk out and not be able to come back, God forbid, that and see your kids, or your kids not see you, because we fail to get engaged here in America as well. This is the country that you've been living in, especially for people who have been here well over 30 something years. This is the time where you really need to be involved. And so how can you do that? Back to your question, is to, joint partnerships with other organizations that are doing something in the community. For me, I've joined different. I was a part of the Houston Area Urban League Young Professionals Board. I did that because I was ignorant to a lot of the things, a lot of the resources that come into the Black community. So I said, what better way? I don't want to, go and be asking my African American friends like, oh, what do we do? I just said, I'm going to get plugged in. And I got plugged in. I'm able to share those resources back into my community and tell them, hey, all of you guys need to get plugged in. So I think that that's another way, is just getting yourself plugged in, going to each other's respective communities and supporting, not just financially, but in outreach, partnering. if it's programming, if it's panel discussions like this, making sure that we're being inclusive when we say that, support Black-owned businesses. Those include your Caribbean, your Haitian, your African, your whatever. Those also include our African Americans that are, in the urban areas, in the downtown areas. It's everybody. It's not just one group of people. And so that's what we have to get our minds out of. Black Lives Matter just for African Americans. It's not. It's for everybody Black. Everybody that's Black in this country, this movement is for you. And this is how you can get involved, is by plugging into those, organizations that have been doing this for years. NAACP, Urban League, other ones, that are going on, even some that are popping up. In Houston, we have the Houston Justice Organization, and they're doing great work right now, just meeting with different council members, and they're, asking for, change in Houston as regards to different policies in the police department. That may be something that you want to join in your respective, city, and say, hey, how can I get involved? Or at least how can I be more educated about what's going on, where the funding is, where the budget is, where the money being allocated to, getting more involved in your community. Because honestly, a lot of times our people in the diaspora, they are very much aware of what's the politics back home. They know. You call them and they will tell you that so-and-so is running, this party is happening, we need to vie for this, for our village, for our precincts, whatever. They know it really, really well. And so now my challenge is to those who know the politics back home very well, to also know it very well here. Obviously, the resources are going to be very different, right? What we take for granted here in America is obviously that some of the needs that are needed back home. However, it doesn't mean that you disengage, right? And I understand that the gravity of those resources are very, very much different, back home as it is here. However, those are two things that you have to be able to do at the same time simultaneously. You have to be able to work on both causes simultaneously. We can't afford to drop either one, because when we do that, then we do a disservice to ourselves and to the people that we love. And so that's why, for me, learning from each other is learning both of those causes. Understand? Learning each other is, supporting those causes. As much as I know right now in Nigeria, we're talking about the major push is about, fighting the injustice of, young girls who are being raped. You understand that that's not something that is, we want to put down, obviously, because that is a huge issue, and it's a cultural issue that has to shift and change, as well. But however, at the same time, we also have Black people who are dying in America just by gunshots, just by kneeling, as we saw with, George Floyd. And so that's why I say it's not one cause versus the other. No, it is supporting each other's cause at the same time. And, they are priority. There isn't one that's one priority over the other. They're both priorities. Yeah. And so when you are somebody like myself who, is from, more than one country, maybe you may have, several, cultures in your own family, you are going to feel the woes and be overwhelmed with all these different causes going on. So that you have to create that balance. But the more people that you get educated about what's going on, the more that those woes kind of come off of you, right? A little bit, because now you don't feel like you have to hold everything in. You've shared it. And that part of sharing your experience is also through education as well. So. Yeah.
That's awesome. Kiana, what do you got to say? Let us know.
She Edidiong, you took it home, girl. You took it home. I'm gonna come at it a little different, because echoing everything you said about how we need to stay together, but so much so in the African community and the Black community, we are so similar in a lot of ways that we don't even realize. And just listening to you, talk about the transition of, being at home and then coming to America, and you're having to learn sometimes 2 languages, versus like trying to figure out, how do I navigate this, and how do I figure out how things work here, just so you can live day to day. But I'm more on like, how do you move forward when you can't even get us to talk to one another? We're so caught up in just the politics of who want to be seen, who want to do what, and it's like, we don't have time for that. Like, we need to make sure that yeah, you going to go vote, and that's fine. But like you said, who are you voting for? And so a lot of the entities that we know that exist love our Black community, love like what we stand for, the things that we have there, but are we relative to the new generation that is coming and emerging in our communities? And so sometimes there's this gap of, you know, yeah, maybe there is a NAACP, but have you met them? Have they met you? Have they made themselves, you know, stand out and be available to others in our community? And so I think as much as we want to link arms, be educated, understand a lot of what you said, and I echo everything, just the being thankful, being grateful, but also realizing that there is work to do. But it starts with ourselves, and until we as a community put down those walls and those barriers, and not looking at our Black brother and sister like something's wrong with them, we're never going to advance the Black agenda in America. And so that's a conversation not for Kansas City. It can happen in Texas. It can happen in ATL, I'm sure. So we all experience it in our own different ways. But it's one of those things. Are we going to sacrifice the betterment for the Black agenda because I don't like how you got to where you are? I'm not so sure because maybe you don't hang out in my group, or you're not speaking my same language, or I'm just trying to be seen. And that's another thing too. We live in a social media digital world, and there's nothing wrong with that. We put our filters up. Zeke, I see you be styling and profiling, you know what I'm saying, and coming up, and I be like, oh wait, that brother looking hard. It's like, are we being seen? Like, real influence is what we're talking about now. Like, that's the influence that I want to see. Like, how are we taking this information back? And Adil, to your point, like voting, like we're getting ready. I felt empowered to have a voter registration, you know, June 19th. I mean, it's going down. So I'm challenging myself too, as we're having this conversation real time, like, man, like, I don't know, you know, I need to look over the ballot. I need to make sure I know who say what they're running for, instead of just like you said, just, all right, I voted, then I showed up and I got my cute sticker, then I put it on. So it's like so reactionary to what looks good, but is it gonna look good for the advancement of your community when you can't apply for that loan, when you can't apply for that grant, when those dollars in that budget isn't allocated to your community? So I think it's even a balance when it comes to the modern day Gen Z and millennial, because we are just so caught up in the what it looks like. And social media is great. It's powerful and it can be used for great things, but it also can be used for bad things. So let's hope and pray that, you know, the Black agenda is more important than just having silos in the community. We should be having the same conversation in 5 years, in 10 years, when we all have kids. Our kids, it should be, what took me 10 minutes, it need to take them 10 seconds. And that's just keeping it real. We need equal opportunity. And sometimes we in our own community make it harder. We don't need the extra layers. White America make that already difficult. We ought to be able to pick up the phone and call each other and say, hey, Zeke, man, like, I got this project, or hey, Edidiong, what you got going on in Texas? You know, don't make it hard for me to reach out to you off of some stuff that you didn't put in your own mind. You know what I mean? So I think for us, it's like, as much as we want to do good, make sure you're good. Make sure you self-reflect. Make sure there's no, you know, tension between what you're trying to do and who you say you are. Be you. And I think until we understand that, then the partnerships, the collaboration, is going to come from a pure place. It's not going to come from a self-preservation because I want to be seen, or I'm just trying to do X, Y, and Z. And to whom is given, much is required. I get that, and we got to practice what we preach, but and we're not perfect. We got a long way to go. But I think that until you do that homework, then we can't collaborate, because we holding up 50 other things. But we need to get to a point, to your point, sis, that, hey, we see each other with each other. You know, we're doing the partnership, we're linking arms, and we're having these conversations, because I tell you, there is an old guard and there's a young guard, but it's like, until we address it, we're never going to get where we need to go. And so hopefully when people go back and watch this conversation, it's like, who do I need to tap on? Who do I need to have a conversation with to kind of break down those barriers, or what you might think might not even be the case, but it was just predestined in your mind that, oh, like, I just heard this. No, don't go off what you heard. If they didn't tell you face to face, you need to go figure it out for yourself. So don't let these Black stereotypes or things in our community that has been going on for years and years and years and my grandma telling me, and it's like, no, we don't need to hear the same thing. We need to make sure that it is different. Right now, we can't afford to be mad at each other because we got shit we got to do. We got shit we got to do. So we don't need no attitude. We don't need no buts or ifs or ands. It's like, no, we need to be together. Like now is the most important time to be on the same page. And if you got anything you need to get off your chest, do it respectfully, you know, sit down, have the conversation. But we can't address that from a partnership standpoint until we're able to do a self-evaluation with ourselves. And once we do that, then everything that was mentioned, you know, we can move forward and help advance the Black agenda, not only for our community, but for America as a whole. Awesome.
Now, let me ask this. This is going to be real quick. This is going to be the last question to then we summarize. I think we're already past time, but I want to ask this because you said this a couple of times. When you say the Black agenda, what do you mean by that? So people can understand what that is. And then secondly, which is the last question is, what are some resources that people can start going to read or watch to help them educate themselves? And what advice or would you give people out there, either Black person, African-American, African, conversation they should start having in their groups to educate themselves, to learn more? And then, those are just
resources right now. I think New York Times just posted this today. It alone, help me if I'm wrong.
Edidiong,
The top like 100 books or something that's been purchased that talks about, you know, Black America. I know I personally just got on Amazon. I mean, literally, like we got too much technology at our finger points for you to not know. That's just not an excuse anymore that none of us should have. So I'm even taking that upon myself, like going back and reading Where Do We Go From Here by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., understanding some of the things and the very things that we're seeing today, he spoke, you know, years ago. And so doing that, if you don't know, text a friend, ask, hey, what are some things that I should be doing? What are books that I should be reading? So we just got access on access. So hopefully that's not a factor. If you don't know, you literally don't know, you need to ask someone. And just what I would say to people, Black and brown people that look like all three of us is really like, I mean, they didn't have a choice. We don't have a choice. And so don't make it optional that you think you're gonna read the book. No, you need to read the book. You need to take like 10 hours out of your week because somebody took 10 years to progress the advancement so you could be cool and not experience segregation. Like that's where I'm at with it. So hopefully we can all lean on each other to understand the importance of not just our history and why it's important, but you want to be able to talk about these narratives and these nuances and these stories relatively where our grandmothers and our grandfathers and our ancestors were to our kids, you know? And so hopefully people can get online and do that research and do what they need to do and ask someone if they don't know. And just really organizations, things that you can get plugged into, literally, like you said, investors, just look it up. Like, hey, I know you're involved here. Is there any organizations or companies or whatever you're wanting to be involved in? If that's real estate, okay, what group is working on equity and making sure that people got access to opportunities, no redlining, the list goes on. Just figuring out and tapping. At this point, it's all about relationships. At this point, it's like, you know, and what do they know? And if they don't know, they should be able to refer you to somebody to make sure that you have proper knowledge in place.
Yeah. So lastly, when you say the Black agenda, what do you mean by that? So people can know.
Oh, I'll say this, and I think the Black agenda, and she said it best, is really, you know, understanding because every community is different, but what sectors of Black, you know, Kansas City, for example, is important to our community. And so if that is affordable housing, if that's, you know, more budget allocation for education, I don't know. How does that impact us in some of those nuances and some of those specific things that city council might be talking about? Or is it police reform? Is it changing the policies? Is it holding our chief of police accountable? I don't know, but if the number speaks increasement and we got a problem, that's the Black agenda. We need to be on one page, like somebody taking accountability. What is the overall arching organization that's saying, here are some demands, and whoever you are in your respective fields, we're saying the exact same thing, but it might come from a different way, but the list ain't changing. That's the Black agenda. It's a consistent set foundations of, hey, this is what's happening in our community where we are, and
Yeah.
we want to see these things change on behalf of Black people in our community.
Awesome, awesome. That's awesome. That's an awesome answer. Now, lastly, Edidiong, so tell us just briefly, because we have like 2 minutes before this cuts off. But tell us briefly, what are some resources that people can go out there and get educated on, so that way they can know what's going on?
I mean, so Kiana kind of touched on a lot of it, actually. So I'm just going to kind of reiterate. I mean, in addition to books, obviously we have technology, but y'all, like, we definitely have TV shows. People are binge watching shows. So whether it's on Netflix, whether it's on regular cable, non-cable, whatever, find a show, watch it. Find another show. It's going to give you a different aspect. Watch it. In addition to also reading those books. But also, I say this, have those difficult conversations with your white counterparts, whether that's at work, whether it's in your circle, whatever the case may be. When they come to you, do not say, oh, you don't know. But obviously, they're coming to you to ask, and you can direct them to Google. But don't just be dismissive. You know, at the same time, for those who are just really not even aware, and I include my African, people as well. Google, like we say Google, but that's what our technology is. You have African American friends, ask them. You have different counterparts. There's so many ways to get plugged in. There are organizations as well. I already mentioned some, Houston area urban. I'm always going to shout them out. But you can get plugged into those organizations just by doing a Google search. I mean, it goes back to Google. But at the end of the day, also making sure that you are aware of what's going on in your city, right? And so be a part of the conversations. Be informed. Go to the city council meetings. We don't want to go to them, but go to them. That's how you find out more resources of what's going on in your community that you live in. It's local politics, but it's direct politics as it relates to you. So I think that those are some few resources, read, watch those TV shows, join one of those organizations or go to one of their, meetings, and also be involved with your local government politics.
Awesome.
Make sure that, like here today, like we home of the National Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, the Black Archives Museum, the American Jazz Museum. There are cultural institutions right here in our city that people have never visited, and they portray Black history. And I'm sure the same for you in Texas.
Yeah, so definitely. We have museums here too. Yeah.
Just drive and just, are you a member? Like, what are you doing to engage there? Like, it's here. We just need to tune in and just take advantage of the resources that are here.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say this. Thank you both for coming on today. You guys have educated me, and I definitely know that you guys have educated a lot of people watching here today. And thank you, Edidiong. Thank you, Kiana, for coming on. You guys are awesome ladies, doing great things, and I am proud of what you guys are doing. Man, thank you for coming on again. I'm gonna sign out now because my time's already up. But this has been wonderful. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep educating people, and man, keep pushing. I'll see you guys on the other side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.